Welcome to the deep dive. We basically take a whole stack of sources and boil them down to what you really need to know. It's kind of your shortcut to getting well informed on a topic.
Exactly. And today we're diving into self-image and self-esteem. They're really interconnected, especially during adolescence.
Right. We've pulled together insights from, let's see, the Global Journal of Human Social Science, UW Stout, the Annals of Psychiatry and Treatment, plus some background from Wikipedia and social work test prep.
And our goal here is really to unpack these concepts, understand them better and see how they impact young people during those really formative teenage years.
Yeah, because self-image, self-esteem, I think most people feel like they get the basics. But when you dig in, like our sources do, you see there are layers and real consequences, especially for teens.
Definitely. There's a lot more complexity there than you might think at first glance.
Okay, so let's unpack it. Where do we start? Maybe just defining the terms clearly.
Good idea. Let's start with self-image. So fundamentally, it's the mental picture you hold of yourself.
Okay, like how I see myself in my mind.
Exactly. And it tends to be pretty resistant to change, actually. It covers, your physical attributes, height, weight, that sort of thing, but also the qualities you think you have.
And where does that picture come from?
Well, it's shaped by your own experiences, but also heavily by judgments you've internalized, things you've picked up from other people.
Right. And I read somewhere there are different types of self-image.
Yes, that's an interesting point. Some models suggest maybe 6 different facets. It depends on the perspective, like how you see yourself versus how you think others see you, and even how you perceive their view of you.
Wow, 6 angles. So it's not just my view, but my perception of your view, too. That adds layers.
Oh.
Okay, so that's the picture. How is self-esteem different?
Right, so self-esteem, that's more about your confidence in your own worth, your abilities, your morals even. It's the evaluation of that mental picture we just talked about.
So how I feel about the picture.
Precisely. It includes your core beliefs like I am competent or I'm worthy, and the emotions that go with those beliefs. Think triumph, despair, pride, shame.
Okay. And can it vary? Like, feel good about one thing but not another?
Absolutely. It can be specific, high self-esteem about your academic skills, but maybe lower about your social skills, or it can be global, just your overall sense of self-worth.
Got it. And people use other terms too, right? Like self-worth.
Self-worth, self-regard, self-respect, self-integrity.
Yeah.
They all kind of tap into that same core idea of valuing oneself.
Okay, so picture versus evaluation, that helps. Has this idea of self-esteem been around long? Is a concept people study?
Well, the idea of self-value goes way back. Philosophers like David Hume in the 18th century talked about its importance for motivation.
Right.
But the formal study of self-esteem really kicked off, I'd say, in the mid-1960s. There was a social psychologist, Morris Rosenberg.
Ah, the Rosenberg scale. I think I've heard of that.
That's the one. He gave a clear definition and, crucially, developed that scale to measure it. That really opened the door for researchers to study it systematically, beyond just theory.
Okay, so we've got the picture self-image and the evaluation self-esteem.
Yeah.
Now, how do they interact? They feel really closely linked.
Oh, they are. Definitely. There's a very strong interplay. For example, research shows pretty clearly that if someone has a distorted body image, like a really negative view of their physical self, that can directly lead to lower self-esteem. Some studies show really high numbers of adolescent girls, maybe 50% up to almost 90% in some reports, feel negatively about their shape or size.
Wow, nearly 90%. That's staggering. And that links to other issues.
Yes, that dissatisfaction is often linked to developing disordered eating behaviors.
So it sounds like, especially for girls, how they look can become like the main way they judge their own worth.
That's a key point from the UW Stout research, yeah. For many girls, the way I look can become a huge indicator of self-worth. But it's not just a one-way street.
That's so.
Well, having low self-esteem in the first place can also make someone more likely to develop a negative body image and maybe engage in those unhealthy eating patterns. It can become a bit of a vicious cycle.
A reinforcing cycle, right? Okay, so adolescence. Big changes happening biologically, psychologically, socially. What are the big factors that really push and pull on self-image and self-esteem during that time? It feels like a vulnerable period.
You're absolutely right. It's incredibly dynamic. If we focus first on body image specifically, puberty is a huge one.
Makes sense. Your body's changing so fast.
Exactly. And those physical transformations can be particularly tricky for girls, often because the cultural ideal is so focused on thinness. That often clashes with natural changes of female increased body fat.
What about boys?
Boys definitely experience body image concerns too, especially if they feel underweight or overweight compared to, say, a muscular ideal. But generally, the research suggests they might face a bit less intense pressure, specifically from media and maybe family compared to girls.
Okay, and you mentioned media. That feels huge today.
Oh, it's massive. Adolescents are just bombarded with media, TV, ads, music videos, social media now, of course. And so much advertising links physical attractiveness with, happiness and success.
Yeah, it's tough comparisons.
Constant comparisons. It can lead young people to really critically evaluate themselves against these often unrealistic, sometimes digitally altered ideals.
And then there are peers. Friends become so important then.
Hugely important. Peer relationships have a massive impact. How you think your friends see you, how you compare yourself to them, it can boost or really damage your self-esteem.
I remember feeling really self-conscious back then.
Yeah, especially in early adolescence. That self-consciousness about peer perception is often heightened. And if you feel like you're developing differently earlier or later, just not like the norm in your group, that can definitely hurt your self-esteem.
And family, they must play a role too.
Absolutely critical. Family dynamics matter a lot. Things like unsupportive comments, teasing about appearance, even subtle pressure that can really fuel insecurity and lower self-esteem around body image.
So it's puberty, media, peers, family, anything else.
Well, we also have to consider the broader picture. Cultural norms about beauty, experiences tied to race or ethnicity, dealing with societal attitudes and stereotypes, and even socioeconomic status can all subtly shape how teens see themselves, both physically and socially.
Okay, that covers body image influences really well. What about the factors influencing self-esteem more broadly, beyond just the physical picture?
Right, so for overall self-esteem, attachment is fundamental, the bonds formed in early childhood.
How does that work?
Well, secure attachment, feeling consistently safe, loved, understood, generally helps the child develop a stronger, more internalized sense of worth, an identity that's their own.
Yeah.
Whereas insecure attachment might lead someone to develop what's sometimes called a donor identity, more dependent on others' approval for their sense of self. So those early family relationships really set a foundation.
And then comes the teenage push for independence.
Exactly. That drive for autonomy is huge in adolescence. And how parents navigate that matters. Research suggests that using indirect control like persuasion, giving advice, explaining reasons rather than just strict rules, helps teens develop more mature coping skills and a sense of competence.
Yeah, I can see how feeling constantly controlled would undermine that.
Yeah.
What else impacts self-esteem?
Shame is a powerful factor. Experiencing things that feel socially devaluing, like maybe struggling badly in school or feeling rejected, can trigger intense shame, which really erodes self-esteem.
Is there anything that helps with that?
Self-compassion seems to be key. Learning to be kinder to oneself during difficult times can buffer against shame's impact.
Okay. And there was something about the real self and ideal self.
Ah, yes. That's about self-evaluation. We tend to compare our real self, who we think we are now, with our ideal self, who we want to be. There's also the dreaded self, who we're afraid of becoming.
Right.
Big gaps, especially feeling like you're becoming that dreaded self, can seriously damage self-esteem.
In academic performance. Does doing well in school boost self-esteem?
There's definitely an association, but it's complex. Just trying to artificially boost self-esteem doesn't automatically make grades go up. It's more intertwined.
Okay. And finally, mental health.
Yeah, there's a strong link. Low self-esteem is often seen as a vulnerability factor. It can increase the risk for developing conditions like depression, anxiety, and, as we mentioned, eating disorders.
It really sounds like everything is woven together. Now, you mentioned that study on University of Ghana students. What did that specific piece of research find about these links?
Right, so that study looked at the correlations between self-esteem, body image, and mental health in their student sample. Interestingly, what they found was only a very weak negative correlation between self-esteem and body image.
Weak negative. So, higher self-esteem didn't strongly mean better body image in their group.
Not statistically, no. There wasn't enough evidence in their data to say self-esteem strongly predicted body image or vice versa.
Okay, what about body image and mental health?
They found a positive correlation, but it was statistically insignificant. So again, they couldn't confidently conclude from their data that a better body image led to better mental health in that group.
And self-esteem and mental health. I thought that link was usually strong.
They did find a strong positive correlation, meaning higher self-esteem tended to go with better mental health scores, but it was also statistically insignificant in their sample. So they couldn't definitively say self-esteem predicted mental health based on their results alone.
Huh. That seems quite different from a lot of other research findings we've touched on. Why the discrepancy?
Well, the researchers themselves highlighted some key limitations. The sample size was quite small, just 80 students.
Okay, yeah, that's not huge.
And they used convenience sampling, meaning they surveyed students who were easily available. This was partly because of COVID-19 restrictions on campus at the time.
Ah, right. That would make things difficult.
It also skewed their sample demographically, mostly first-year and final-year students. So they were careful to say, look, we can't generalize these findings to all students at the university, let alone universally.
So what's the takeaway then?
They stressed the need for more research with larger, more representative samples. And, crucially, considering the cultural context. How body image and self-esteem are viewed and valued can differ a lot across cultures.
That's a really important point. Culture matters.
Immensely. So while this specific study didn't find strong statistical links, it doesn't negate findings from other contexts. It really highlights that these relationships aren't always simple or universal. Context is critical.
Right. So despite that study's specific results, the broader picture still suggests self-esteem is pretty important for mental well-being.
Absolutely. The overall body of research strongly supports that. Generally, having healthier self-esteem helps people face life with more confidence, more optimism. It's about accepting yourself, faults and all, and that tends to lead to better relationships too.
So thinking practically, what helps build a stronger self-image, especially in kids and teens?
Well, communication is key. Open, supportive talk. Providing reassurance, genuinely supporting their hobbies and interests, whatever they are. Having good role models around them is also important. And sometimes professional help, like counseling, can provide a really safe space for adolescents to develop their own coping strategies around these issues.
Okay, so bringing this all together, what's the main message from this deep dive into self-image and self-esteem in adolescence?
I think the core takeaway is just how complex and intertwined these concepts are. Self-image, the picture, self-esteem, the evaluation, both deeply influence how teenagers develop and their overall mental health.
And they're shaped by so many things interacting: biology, media, friends, family, culture.
Exactly. It's a whole mix of factors. And while we see correlations, like between body image dissatisfaction and low self-esteem, it's not always a simple A causes B situation. Individual experiences and the specific cultural setting really matter.
Right, it's nuanced.
Definitely. Which leads us to a final thought, maybe something for you, the listener, to reflect on.
Okay.
Just take a moment to consider the messages you encounter every day. You know, the subtle ones, the not so subtle ones, in media, in conversations, maybe even in your own head. How might those messages be shaping your self-image and self-esteem? Or how might they be affecting the perceptions of people around you, especially any young people in your life? It's worth thinking about how we can all maybe help foster a more positive, more accepting environment, both internally and externally.
That's definitely something to mull over. How the messages we absorb and the ones we put out contribute to this whole picture. It's clear understanding ourselves and our worth is, well, it's an ongoing process.
It really is. There's always more to learn.
Well, thanks for digging into this with us today. Lots to think about.